In this video article, we're going to look at James Patterson's freight train method adapted for short stories. Now, before we dive in, if you want to get an email with a timestamped overview every time I release a new video, then head over to my website at deliberate-practice.com, sign up for my email list. There's other content at the website. Plus, in the weeks and months to come, I'll be adding more thank you goodies to my email subscribers. At the moment, if you're an email subscriber, you can just drop me an email and ask to be directed to the writing forwards trainer, which is something that ties in with this video. So let's dive in. So the freight train method. This is based on material that James presents in the 8th lecture in his masterclass series, and he gives a hat tip to Raymond Chandler and other professional writers who always also use this method. Should you get the masterclass? My view on this is if you only learn one thing that improves your writing, then the investment is a positive one, although I would note that you used to be able to buy single masterclasses, but now it doesn't appear that you can, and they're trying to push you into the annual recurring membership. And for me, that's not a model I particularly like. But if and there are some good writing courses on there, if you can find 3 or 4 and you think, yeah, I can do 1 month on Patterson, 1 month on David Mamet, 1 month on Dan Brown or David Baldacci or N.K. Jemisin or some of the other writers that they have there, then provided you're disciplined and you do that and you don't use that learning as a substitute for writing, then it can be a good investment. I will also note that the best writing masterclass that I've seen there, they've actually taken down due to irregularities in Neil Gaiman's personal life, and obviously it was by Neil Gaiman. Hopefully that will come back online because that's really good. But if you're a thriller writer, like Patterson stuff, it's probably worth investing to check out all the other stuff in this. This is just like a slice from one lecture. And the key fact about the freight train method is it emphasizes momentum over perfection and getting things written rather than worrying over precise details. Now, Patterson uses this method as how he writes his first drafts. I think it's a possibility for short story writers to use it to knock out first drafts of short stories very quickly. So, why short story writers need the freight train approach? Short stories, because of their concision, demand intense focus and emotional precision. And that can lead to overthinking, which can lead to a kind of paralysis, because you're thinking, oh, should I use this word or this word? Which one's got the most meaning? Which one carries the most weight? And so it's easy to get stuck as you're writing in revisions on the go, instead of writing the story, discovering the story through writing, moving forwards with the story. So the freight train approach for short stories would ideally aim to complete the story in one writing session or just a handful of writing sessions. So let's look at adapting the freight train approach for short stories. If you're doing it, trying to do, let's say, 3 or 4 hours and get the story done, then work in Pomodoro-like sections. If you don't know what the Pomodoro method is, then Google it and look it up. But essentially, it's you set little time blocks, 30 minutes, 25 minutes, 5-minute break, then reset the block. And use each of those blocks, and you may have to adapt the length of your block to your writing style, but use each of those blocks to draft a complete scene or a complete section in your Pomodoro-like time section. Used scene-based momentum rather than chapter, and push through every story beat without stopping. Also, another way to keep momentum going, story flow, momentum, and to maintain the focus on momentum over perfection, is to use a TBD system. So that means a to be determined. And there's a couple of further details on that in the next slide. But what you want to focus on is capturing the story's emotional core first and leave the fine tuning for later drafts. And you may find that if you write like this, the energy that you write with is present in the story as well. There's something about when you can write quickly and not stop to pick at details, especially if you're writing in flow, that the words that you have on the page, yes, they may need some editing and some details layering in, but overall the energy levels that you've written with is captured in your writing, and your writing has a bit more life and a bit more vividness about it. So techniques to help create this short story momentum. So when you're starting a scene, start mid-action or mid-conversation, so you're not worrying about starting the scene with a perfect opening line. You just go, right, we're in this scene, this character's here, bang, what's he doing? Drop the character in and start writing. Write scene ending placeholders before you start the scene, e.g. character fights antagonist and wins, so that you've got forward direction. This is like a micro version. If you saw the video I did, it was called Brandon Sanderson, outline backwards, right forwards. This is like a micro version of that. The way I do it with short stories, and writing short stories when you're a beginning writer, for me, the main things to get from the process is, one, is to try and find your writing process. Two, is to get used to putting fictional words on the page so it doesn't feel strange. When you first start out, it can feel a bit odd, but once you've done it several times, it doesn't feel odd. And getting used to writing, there are other benefits too, but so I've just done a story outline that I've started writing. What I did was I used the process described in the Brandon Sanderson outline in reverse video. So I outlined in reverse, and now I've got a Scrivener document, and it's got 7 scenes or 7 subparts on it. Each subpart is a scene, and at the bottom of the document, with room for me to write my text, it tells me in brackets, it says what the next scene is. So when I start that scene, I know where I'm going to. And when I got to the second scene, what I did was I summarized where I'd came from in my Pomodoro break, and then came back and started writing to the end of that scene, and did that. And so the first writing on that scene, I think I ended up nearly 2 hours with the breaks, and wrote 3 scenes of 500-600 words, using kind of a mix of Sanderson's reverse from the end, outline forwards, and Patterson's freight train method, just to make that forward momentum and just to get words down on the page. So this is a TBD tool. Use brackets for research needs. So if you need to find a specific, let's say a model of a car, just write the Ferrari and then put in brackets color, question mark, question mark, question mark, something like that. One thing you can do that's quite good is if every time you write a TBD, if you put 3 asterisks with it, then when you've got your finished draft, one thing that you could do is go find 3 asterisks, and whatever software you're using will take you straight to each of those, and you can go, all right, okay, I need this detail. Personally, when I do any kind of revision, I prefer to print everything out on paper and do the revision away from the computer. At some stage in the future, I'll do video articles on revision and my thoughts on revision too. Overcoming short story specific obstacles. So we've touched on this earlier. Don't polish sentences during drafting. Just try and keep moving forwards, especially in that first draft where momentum trumps perfection. You want to get words on the page. You can always layer in detail, create better metaphors, polish up dialogue cues, all that kind of stuff. You can't do that if those words aren't on the page. And one of my other videos is called something like the number one mistake rookie writers make, something like that. And basically what it is if you're writing and you keep stopping to edit and revise, you're switching between the two hemispheres of the brain. When you're writing, that's the subconscious part of the brain, and if you've got that engaged, don't switch out of it to edit a specific sentence. You can do that later with the editing brain. Keep the writing brain going, keep moving forwards. Here's another TBD. If you're stuck on a metaphor or an image that you want it to say something, whether it's thematic or something, don't spend half an hour thinking of it. Just put in brackets something poetic about rain, or need a thematic image that ties in with the weather, something like that, and then just keep writing forwards. Again, focus off the first draft is completion. Remember that you're moving forwards, you're going to finish the first draft and do whatever you need to do to move forwards. Some implementation thoughts. Schedule your freight train sessions during your peak energy hours. That, of course, relies on the fact that you know what your peak energy hours are. But most people know when they're at their best for writing, and try and start at the times that suit you and your unique body clock and how the rhythms of the day work for you. If you read interviews with writer, you'll find some writers write first thing in the morning, some writers write at night when everyone is asleep. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You've got to find what works for you. Create your toolbox of TBD annotations. So I've given you some ideas: asterisks, brackets. Just have tools at your disposal so you can keep writing forward. So if let's say you're writing a longer story, let's say you've progressed to novellas, and you can't remember a character's name, you think it was Jack, just write Jack, don't look back, just write Jack, and then in brackets put, is that the right name, question mark, question mark, question mark, or asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Just get used to doing stuff like that when you're writing your first drafts. What you're looking for is to push forwards and keep that energy and try and transfer that energy to the page. Write forwards, write fast. I think is something that you should try out if you've never tried it out before. Use timers if you want to, or you can track in completed scenes. So one thing with timers that is a pain in the ass is if you set a timer and it goes off and interrupts your train of thought when, let's say, you're 3/4 of the way through a scene. So one thing you can do, you can adapt your Pomodoro, is look at your scenes. I said my short story was split into 6 specific scenes/sequences. I wrote a complete one of those halfway through the story, complete one of those, then took a little break, went and got a drink, walked around for 5 minutes, then came back, started on the next one. So an alternative to tracking by either word or timers is by tracking in scenes. Again, find what works for you, stick with that. But the one thing with this method, and it's something I think you should try several times, is learn to write forwards. I mentioned at the start of the video, if you're a subscriber to my email list and then you drop me an email, I'll send you the link to this little app I built which will train you to write forwards. You can't possibly write backwards because the backspace has been the backspace function has been removed, and if you're an advanced user you can set it so you can have 2 backspaces, but that's all you're allowed, and you've just got to learn to write forwards. It's an interesting skill to learn. When I taught myself to type, I taught myself to type on a mechanical typewriter, literally one of the ones with the metal arms that would come forward and hit the paper through the ink. The letter was on the end of a mechanical arm. The one thing that's great about those, and to a certain degree electric typewriters as well, I progressed to an electric typewriter reasonably quickly. You can't really write backwards. With an electric typewriter, it was easier to go backwards and cross words out. But I learned on a mechanical typewriter just to put brackets and put delete that shitty sentence, close brackets, and trust that I would pick that up at edit stage, which I would. So some core principles of the freight train method: forward motion is paramount. Remember, this is for first draft. Self-criticism is suspended. The ideal is to be writing so fast that you outpace your critical brain. That's a Ray Bradbury concept. If you can get to that point, I think you need to be able to type at 50, 60 words a minute to do that. That seems to be like the sweet spot. I find I can type when I'm flying at 110, 120 words per minute. And again, if you can write in flow as well, that will make it easier to write fast. And you'll find if you're writing in flow and you're writing fast, that the drafts that you produce sparkle with energy much more than if you're going, right, okay, my character's got to do this, but. Oh, I didn't like that word. Let me go back and fix that word. If you write like that, and some people do write like that, and that's their process. And if that's your process and that's what you have to do, then that's what you have to do. For me, and from what I've gleaned from listening to other writers talk about it, that the first draft, written fast, written in a way to avoid self-criticism, tends to have more energy than drafts written in other ways. Remember, completion is the primary goal, not the primary goer. Missed an L off there somehow. And also the other thing is speed can generate creative momentum, because as you write fast and as you get into flow, you start accessing the deep part of the brain, what Stephen King calls the boys in the basement. And when you're writing from there, or when your writing is powered from there, it tends to come up with things that surprise you, and are of a much higher quality than if you're writing from the front part of the brain, where the critical editor has got time to say, yeah, don't write that, that sounds shit, cut that out, write this instead. And you're then cutting words out and going back and cutting more words out. If you write like that, try and get away from that process. Try and learn to write forwards. Also, the act of continuous writing helps reduce writer's block, because once you've got a line on the page, and we talked about how to do that, start in mid-action or in mid-sentence and just move forward. And once you've got used to writing forwards, the act of writing the first line is the domino that tips everything else, and you'll find that you can move forwards and that writer's block is not something that really causes problems for you. So, closing out, remember, every writer needs to find their own process. So if you try this and it doesn't work for you, So if you try this and it works for you, that's great. If it doesn't, it's not something that you failed at. It's something you can add to your list of things that didn't work for you as you try and discover your own writing process. Even if it doesn't work for you, you might find one or two things from this process which you can take and add into building your own unique hybrid process. Because at the end of the day, if you read 10 interviews with writers, I almost guarantee that while you might find some commonalities between some of them, that every single one of them will have their own process, and that's their process. And whether that works for you, you won't know till you try, and you may have to try a few times. And you might try something a few times, doesn't work for you, but this one part of it does, and you can blend it with something else in the same way that you blend two disparate ideas to come up with a unique story idea. You blend one idea from this process with an idea from someone else's process with this idea, with your thoughts on this, and suddenly you've got a unique process that works for you, and you start producing regular stories. That's the goal. So if you haven't done this, and you're writing your first stories, try this one out, because one of the things it emphasizes is completing the first draft, and getting into the habit of finishing your work is one of the hardest things to learn. I've got a couple of students who've written to me, students in my writing vault, who've said over the years I've got a ton of stories that are half finished or three-quarter finished. And that is a symptom of your ego stepping in to stop you finishing it, because if you don't finish the story, you can't send it out and the ego is all about protecting you. I'll talk about resistance in and how it affects writer's block as I see it in other videos. But if you've got a number of stories that are half finished or three-quarter finished, that's a resistance thing. It's not a problem with your process, and you've just got to find a strategy to get over that and actually finish that story or those stories. So finishing is an important part of writing, and this is a way to get used to that. Okay, I mentioned the Writing Vault. There's the URL there. There'll be a link in the description of the video where you can go there. It's a resource I'm putting together for frustrated and or aspiring fiction writers. It grows every day. There are more things added. I add exercises. If you've seen the scales and arpeggios for writers video, I'm adding some of those most days. I've started cataloging my thoughts on deliberate practice for writers with video articles. The third article's in the Writing Vault with detailed notes. I'll be doing 2 or 3 of those a week until that project's finished, so it will go on for 3 or 4 months. There's loads of other stuff too, so go and check out the link in the description box and go and have a look and see what you think. If you've got any questions on that, just drop me an email. Use this email address, paul@deliberate-practice.com, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can with my thoughts on your questions. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. I'd love to hear your experience if you try this method out. I've used it several times, and it's great for getting first drafts on the page. Helps if you can write forwards as well, and you've trained yourself to do that. So don't forget, if you join the email list, you get access to that trainer. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.